What is up, everyone? Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. I am cozy inside, and as we speak, it is spitting freezing rain outside. So the schools are closed, businesses are closed. It's supposed to progressively get worse throughout the week. So we're pretty much all just hunkered down in the house. And so as you can see here, I have seeds that need to get started. And so Nathan has went out into the greenhouse, filled me up so many trays, that way I didn't have to freeze. And I thought, well, you know what, let's just spend this ice day seed starting. I want to kind of walk through the system. I know I've told you my must have seed starting supplies. I've told you, you know, seed starting one-on-one, my system for staying organized, but I haven't really started seeds with you guys since last year. So I thought this would be fun because we're modeling a lot of different options this year for seed starting, just to try to figure out what's going to work the best. So here you'll see we've got these mini 20 soil blocks, which we'll be seeding with a drop seeder. Then we have the air pruning trays that we'll be using for certain stuff. And then another thing I'm going to try are these 6-packs. They're very similar to the air pruning. They've got this high slit, which allows, you know, for the plant not to become root bound. But I'm hoping that if I start all my nasturtiums in here, I can prevent that potting up, because while some things it makes sense to pot up, I want to try to not have everything that we're, you know, transplanting out into our garden that we have to up pot several times, especially if we're in a situation like this when we just have horrible weather and we're not even able to put our stuff out in the greenhouse right now. So what we're going to start here in these mini 20 soil blocks, I just have a mesh 1020 tray, which actually looks like this. I have, you can see the holes here, so it makes great for bottom watering and for soil blocks. I have this in a deep 1020 flat with no holes. So this is what that hole setup looks like. We're going to be seeding Craspedia and 3 different yarrows. So I mentioned in a few previous videos, not every flower do you actually need to cover. And so, you know, really, I can't think of any vegetables that you don't actually cover with soil, but with flowers in particular, a lot of them actually need the light to germinate. And so that's how it is with the yarrow. So we're going to seed these. I'm not going to cover anything on top of them. And then for the Craspedia, which is this fun little yellow ball that you can put in different floral arrangements, it just says lightly cover with vermiculite. And so I'll have to come back in and add that on there. But we are going to be using the drop seeder here. So I'm just going to seed my things at the top, hover it over, and we'll get to planting. All right, so I've put some in the top here, as you can see. I'm just shaking them in. All right, so you can see here, I've just put all these. Now, I do think it's important to look when you order seeds and see what it says that its germ rate is, because that will help you kind of determine like how many to seed. So this is 85% germ rate, and it was tested March of this past year. And so seeds don't really go bad per se, but how you take care of them is going to depend on, you know, their germination, and each year that germination is going to go down. So a lot of people swear by keeping their seeds in the freezer that it helps them germinate faster and last longer. And so for me, if I'm worried about that, I'm just gonna seed more than one. So in each of these small little holes here, I have about 2 or 3 seeds, and that'll ensure that probably at least one of them will get seeded. So I'm just gonna hover over here, kind of move my soil blocks some. Make sure they all fall in. Got a couple stragglers there. But that is a question I get asked often, is I've had these seeds forever, will they actually germinate? They will. You might just want to plant, you know, more than one to ensure that germination happens. All right, and then I've just got my plant tag here. Another thing that I like to do here is write the date on the back, because it makes it super easy to know when you started them. Now, granted, you know, if you're like me, you've got that really nice, efficient system, but it's still nice just to be able to look on the back of the tag and see when you started things. So now here we have our yarrow. I just have 3 different varieties. I have the summer pastel, which I have a lot of this in the cottage garden right now. It's really beautiful. The berries is really pretty. And then I added a new variety, which is a flower burst red shade, which seemed really, really pretty. I'm hoping I can use the drop seeder for these. I know these yarrows are pretty tiny seeds. Anytime you get a seed packet, with little seeds in it, that's when you know you're in trouble. So I think the 1.8 or the 1.5 will probably work here. Just pop that out. Let's see what we got. So for these that are really hard to do with the drop seeder, obviously I want to limit how many of those because it is really time consuming hand seeding these really small flowers. And so what I like to do is I like to keep these limited on things that I know are going to yield me more. So yarrow, there's no one in our area growing yarrow. It can be used as a cut flower and it can also be used as a dried flower. And the great thing about this too is that it's a perennial and it actually spreads. So once I plant this, you know, some of mine died last year because of the unexpected frost, but ideally I'll just plant the few varieties that I like and they'll keep spreading and coming back year after year. So I know that this is worth the time investment on the front end, it being a little more tedious because it is so versatile, and once I get it established in my cottage garden, it'll be there year after year and just keep coming back. But I would think about that if you are trying to sell and you're having to do something that you can't really automate. You'll have to just really evaluate if it's worth it to you and if, you know, you ended up getting in profit what it was worth for all your time and labor invested in it. Alrighty, so once I have started these, they're just gonna go back up underneath the grow lights here. It is important too, like you don't have to have a heat mat on them. Just make sure that your soil's good and moist when you start everything. I mean, it's in our house, so it's pretty warm. It's probably like 69 degrees in our house, so I think that they're totally fine without a heat mat. But I don't have the grow lights turned on right now because I'm trying to shoot a video. It'd be very fluorescent. But we just let it mimic what it would get outside. So we're not keeping our grow lights on continuously. We're turning them on in the morning. We're turning them off in the afternoon to give them a little bit of the break. The whole idea is whether you're growing in your house or you're growing out in a greenhouse, is just to mimic the environments they would have outside. You're pretty much setting them up, mimicking what the weather's like when you move them out as well, which is why it's really important when your transplants are big enough before you actually move them out into your gardens to make sure that you're hardening them off, get them experience. Once these, you know, start sprouting and getting a little bit bigger, I'll be taking my hands, moving alongside, just creating some sort of motion, making sure they have really sturdy stems. Maybe we'll add a fan in, some things like that, but you certainly just want to gradually introduce them to the elements and not just put them outside when they've had a very controlled environment. Otherwise, they're going to experience what's called a transplant shock. And sometimes the transplant shock can be so severe that it actually kills your seedlings. And I know nobody wants to experience that. So I would just say as your seedlings begin to grow, either add a fan on them, take your hands through, just always kind of keep hands on them to make sure you're really just like toughening up your seedlings. All right, so next up I have my nasturtiums. Now, I didn't originally have my nasturtiums being planted until April because I was just gonna plant them out in our cottage garden, but realizing that there was a demand for this and that I was gonna try to sell more, I knew that I could transplant these out into my high tunnel. That means I could start them earlier and transplant them out sooner. There were a couple varieties that were climbing ones that I'll just save to go out into the cottage garden, but these are just bushing varieties. So what I have here is I'm going to put these in this 72 cell air prune tray, and my hope is that we will just keep them in these trays until they get ready to go out into the tunnel, which will be nice. And so the only bad thing about edible flowers and even just some rare varieties is very seldomly are you going to be able to buy that in bulk, which is why you can get a higher price point for it because a lot of people just aren't growing it in volumes. And so each of these seeds are only 25 seeds. So we're going to go ahead and plant these all, and I'm just going to kind of plant all three to a tray here, which will have me being a little off because this is a 72 cell tray. All of these together will be 75. But what I will probably do in this instance is just double seed a couple of them. And then when I get ready to transplant them out, I will just gently pull apart the roots. So nasturtiums are really interesting. I've actually saved my own nasturtium seeds before. It's very easy to do. But you guys can see here, they're these weird little brain shaped things. They make it very, very easy to hand seed. These are pretty big for any sort of drop seeder, but you guys can see here, I mean, you can easily just go in. I just like to pop them all. If I know I'm gonna be doing 3 trays of these, go through pretty quickly, pop them around the top, and then I'll just come back in and push them down. And if you find a system, you know, the things that you are having to hand seed, this is pretty easy in my opinion because they're just so big. All right, so a good rule on the back of all of your seed packets will be all the planting instructions that you need. But you just want to make sure that you're planting, you know, the depth either according to the seed packet, or a good rule is that you want to plant your seed twice as deep as it is wide. Once you get familiar with seed starting though, you're really just kind of eyeballing it. Obviously the ones that don't want to be covered up, you'll just leave them on the surface of the soil. So I just go through, push down with my finger, and then cover it up. What you don't want to do is plant it too deep, because what happens then is your plant's going to spend all of its energy trying to get to the light, and more than likely it'll die before it ever makes it there. And so sometimes if I notice that my, you know, seeds should have already germinated and they're not, they're new seed, there's no reason that I'm having a hard time, what I'll do is actually brush back the surface of the soil, and I will see that little bitty seedling trying to germinate and sprout. It was just covered too far up. So if you notice that and you're trying to troubleshoot and figure out, well, what could I do? What is causing this? Just brush back some soil. Maybe, you know, you just planted it too deep. It's a pretty common mistake, even if you've been growing food for a while, especially if you're adding on a lot of new varieties that you're just having, you know, to really cater to each of their planting depths and various things like that. Obviously in nasturtium seeds, we're going to plant a lot deeper than we would some sort of lavender or eucalyptus, those tiny seeds. But just make sure when you do it that you are labeling it. And so I just label right here, and so I know that that's for these. The cherry jewel, let's see, I'll have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the tip top. Let's start seeding. So you guys already know that I am a massive spreadsheet nerd, and so this would be a great opportunity to go in and jot down some notes. I am actually going to share with you guys my spreadsheet at the end of this video on just some of the notes that I give myself and what I'm actually going to be doing this year, specifically with dahlias. So I won't be doing this with all varieties. My dahlias, the edible flowers, as I'm really trying to hone in what I'm wanting to grow and phase out what did best, I'm going to be doing more detailed notes on like picture taking. And so, you know, I have all these random pictures in my phone, and I do break them up into albums of like dahlias, sunflowers, etc. But I'm going to be doing this and putting a slot in my spreadsheet where I can jot down, you know, different photos throughout the season. That way I can just have a better reference moving into the next season on if I want to continue to grow that variety and stuff like that. And I do think that that just kind of helps you stay organized. I cannot tell you how much time I've spent just scrolling back through old photos. And so if you can kind of eliminate that, you can go to your spreadsheet and you've just got a column where you can insert a picture. I think it's going to set you up for a lot of success. Even if you're just doing this for your own family, you certainly do not have to be selling to be efficient with these things. If you're just trying to figure out what variety performed best because you're wanting to can a lot of salsa, or maybe you're wanting to put up a lot of tomato paste, you're going to need to know which one was, you know, the most producing, the best disease resistant, etc, etc. So that's just a little tip that I do, and I'll share with you guys at the end of this video what that looks like for me. All right, once I'm done, I will bottom water, and then again, this is just going right here on my rack. So we have already had to add another layer of grow lights down here. Just because with this crazy weather, I knew I'm gonna have to be starting things inside for a little bit longer than I would originally plan. But I think this is really hopefully encouraging to you guys too who just want to start your things indoors. You can get by pretty cheap with everything that you need. So I'm going to be growing fennel for a customer this coming spring and summer, and so I'm going to be doing a 72 cell of Florence fennel, and then I've got another 72 cell that I'm going to be doing for our Salvinova mixes. So ideally I should be transplanting, I should be starting and transplanting every week 80 Salvinova transplants for the bed space that we have. And so I have been doing these mini 20 blocks, but I really don't think that it's going to be a sturdy enough transplant. I'd have to spend a lot of time watering it in really well to make sure that it didn't die, because it's a really small root system in those small mini 20s. And so I thought that's going to take me quite a bit of time on the back end after I've transplanted, and I just want to cut my time, you guys. And so I'm actually going to try doing this, because if I double seed again, I can kind of just separate some of these out. That means I would just need to be starting 1 tray of these per week, every single week for the entire year of the mix. And what I do is I take 4 different Salvinovas, I take 2 greens, 2 reds, I mix them all together in a seeder, and I just go through and seed them all. So it's a nice little mixture that you get if you're making like a spring mix or a salad mix. So those are the last 2 things for vegetables, and then I do have some of those pansies and violas, and then we're gonna wrap this video up, y'all. Just like that, we got another one done. Now, I would love, like I mentioned, to have everything set up on a drop seeder and just the most efficient system, but unfortunately, since we are growing some pretty diverse things, I can't always do that, and that's okay. And you may not always be able to do that either. And so figure out the places and the time where you can just like speed up your systems, and know, like I said, the things that you can't, you're gonna have to hand seed. Make sure that it's just like something either your family really enjoys, or maybe if you are selling, that it's just something that you're able to like recoup your time hand seeding those things. But we got another one in here, a few more down. All right, so the last thing I have to seed are all of my violas and pansies, which I'm actually pretty excited about. And so I'm gonna do a couple in a couple different trays just to kind of see. So I'm gonna do some in these 6-packs to see if I could start to finish transplant what it looked like in this. And then I'm gonna also do a tray full of the air pruning 72 cell trays. I like to just kind of have options here to see, since I am working with some of these trays that I have never worked with before. The only way I'm gonna know what I like is just by doing it. And so hopefully by the end of the season, I can know what I'm gonna move forward into the summertime with, and have a pretty efficient system there. But until then, I'm just having to play around a little bit. Another few hundred seeds started. What better way to spend a nasty ice day of my hands in the soil. So now I'm gonna pull up my laptop and kind of share with you guys kind of what this looks like for me tentatively. So this is the Farm Plan 2023 Varieties and Rotations. And this is kind of just like how I take notes in hopes that if you're trying to build out these systems for yourself, that this is helpful. All right, so I've got my spreadsheet here, and at the bottom, you guys should be able to see that's the tunnel that we're growing down here to sell. This is our greenhouse. We've got the culinary garden, cottage garden, edible flowers, and sunflowers. By doing this, we can be very specific with our notes and build these all out accordingly. So essentially here, I just got my crop, the variety. This is for my spring planting, so we'll have one that's for summer, fall, and winter. And so let's see, cucumbers. I have 2 rows per bed every foot. Calculate how many seeds I need to start every 4 weeks. We've got our tomatoes, 2 rows per bed every 2 feet. Plant all at once. Let's see, for the fennel, which we just started, 80 fennel, 4 rows, 6 inches apart, 10 feet of bed space. Our carrots for direct seeding, 4 rows per bed, heavy seed, thin out. So I just go through and add some pretty detailed notes here. Spinach, 4 rows per bed, every 4 inches. For a culinary spinach that we're letting get taller, I've got every 3 to 4 inches. Then I'm even more specific down here. It gets 6 to 8 inches tall, cut at the base of the plant, bunched together, wash once. And so I'm really able to narrow down here, like this isn't something that we're having to wash several times. We had those long stems on there, and so I'll just share this spreadsheet with you know, Nathan and Caleb, who's on our team helping out this summer. That way if they have to harvest any of these or they have to like direct seed them, or transplant them or whatever, they know exactly what to do. And so even if you're not at a place where like you have got people who are helping you, maybe it's just your backyard garden, by creating this, whether it's in a spreadsheet or on paper, when you get ready to transplant out, you're not having to go back through and find the back of your seed packet. We also like don't really follow the seed packet a lot. We do really dense plantings here, and we'll just harvest smaller. And so, you know, when you have this note, you can go back and reference, and then I'll also add another tab that's just notes, and it'll be like, all right, actually I, you know, wanted to do my cucumbers, you know, 2 rows per bed, and I found out that I could actually plant that, and I could plant, you know, some spinach on the side of it. It just kind of really lets you hone in on how you can best use your small space. So that's all I have for you guys today. Coffee is calling my name. Nathan's making some chili, and so I think I'm gonna call it quits for the day. I think I'm done working. I'm gonna enjoy my coffee, hang out with the kiddos, and deem it just a snow week here on the farm. But if you're starting your seeds, know that I'm right there with you. There is something just so special about getting your hands in the soil and seeding and knowing that the bounty, like I can even imagine now, I'm literally looking out my office window and I just see ice and snow covered the grass, and I know that I'm putting in the work now that's gonna reap a bounty, you know, months down the road when I'm pouring sweat out in the high tunnel. But it's a promise, right? It's a promise and it's a hope for what's to come. And for me, that's always a really special moment. So thank you all for hanging out with me today. I'll talk to you soon.